Welcome back to the Baseball Blue Book podcast. My name is Eric Wilbenaw, the president of the Baseball Blue Book, and today I am joined with head coach Marizzaldi with Seton Hill out of Greensburg, Pennsylvania. How are you, coach?
I'm doing great, Eric. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Well, I am excited to have you on the program, but before we get into your journey and your program, I want to remind everybody to subscribe to the channel. We are on YouTube. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and you can also listen to us on Spotify or Apple iTunes. So we are excited to be in the great state of Pennsylvania. We were just talking a little bit about some people that we know, some players that you've had on the teams that we've known, but it's a lot of fun being back in the great state of Pennsylvania, specifically Western PA, and nothing against the other sides of the state, but it's a great place. Coach, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get you started with your journey.
Well, I am blessed to be starting my 21st year here at Seton Hill, all as the head coach. So I got to Seton Hill back in January of 2003, and I had the opportunity to start the baseball program from scratch here. And it's been an incredible opportunity, incredible journey. I have been married for 19 years. I have two beautiful daughters. One is 11, one is 14, neither of which have ever touched a baseball or a softball in their life, which is kind of crazy. But they're very into some other sports. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, which is only about an hour from Greensburg. So another great thing about the opportunity I have here is that it's somewhat close to my roots. I didn't spend all of my coaching career in Western PA. Actually, after I graduated from Duquesne University, I got a graduate assistant position at Lakeland College, a small Division III out in Wisconsin. It was just a fantastic opportunity for me to not just get a graduate degree, but also to dive headfirst into college coaching. I was given a great opportunity there by John Weber to handle the pitching staff for 2 years, and then parlayed that into an opportunity to come back to my alma mater and coach under my former head coach, Mike Wilson, at Duquesne University. And I was there for a year and a half as the top assistant, and then moved back here to Greensburg to take over this position at Seton Hill. So that's a quick snapshot of my journey and in coaching and where I'm at right now.
Coach, did you know right away, or when did you really realize that you wanted to do coaching for a career?
I actually realized while I was in college. I played at Duquesne and had an arm injury that really cut my career short, and actually had an opportunity while I was still in college to start coaching high school. So I guess my journey in coaching started a little bit earlier. In 1997, I was the head freshman baseball coach at my alma mater, Baldwin High School. The next year, I coached the junior varsity team, and then the following year, I coached I was assistant on the varsity team. And in 1999, in the year 2000, I managed the Baldwin American Legion program, which 20 some years ago, Legion was kind of the only show in town, and it was outstanding baseball. So to be 22 years old managing a Legion program was a great experience for me. And that's about the time that I wanted to try to make a career out of coaching. But it wasn't easy. It took me a whole entire year after I graduated to land a GA position. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, grad assistant positions in college coaching were hard. But fortunately, after about 12 months of applying, maybe sending close to 100 applications, I finally got the break that I was searching for out at Lakeland College. So I kind of worked my way up from high school to Legion, and then to Division III, up to Division I. And even here at Seton Hill, when I first took over as head coach, we were an NAIA program, played in the NAIA for 3 years, and then moved to Division II. So I feel like I have a very well-rounded background coaching. I've coached at every level of collegiate baseball, as well as high school and Legion.
Talk a little bit about, with your experience being at all those different levels. What are some of the similarities, and then really specifically, what are the real differences between those different levels, and most importantly, between the high school and into the collegiate level?
Well, just specifically to college, when you think about NAIA Division III, Division II, and Division One, to be honest with you, I think the difference in the on-field level of baseball between NAIA D2 and D3 is honestly not that significantly different. And of course, everyone has heard, you'll find some Division III schools that could probably kick the crap out of some D2s, right? And some D2s that could beat up on some D1s. I do think, in Division I baseball, it's there's much more separation, right? You've got your Power Fives and your mid majors, and there probably becomes some overlap in the level of baseball when you take some of the higher tier Division IIs. And compare them to some of the mid-major Division Ones, you're not going to find a whole lot of difference in the level of baseball there. Once you get into the ACC, SEC, some of the Power Fives, of course, that level of baseball is elite. From high school to college, to be quite honest with you, my perception is that it varies across the country. When you start talking about Florida and Texas, talk about high school baseball, I think you're going to find a little bit different talent pool down there than you would maybe in some of the northern states. But I do believe that jump from high school to college baseball, whether you're going from high school to Division I or high school to Division III, is just, it's a big jump for all kids. College coaches are just so much more educated now. There's so much more technology and training available at the collegiate levels that, no matter what level you go to from high school to college, it's going to be a pretty good jump, and, along with that, I don't want to dive too deep into the recruiting side of it, but I think a strong desire by all high school kids is to step in and make an impact right away. Everyone, as they're looking for that college, they want to know, like, where am I going to get the best opportunity to maybe play early in my career? And, I just think at almost every level, that's a big jump. Sometimes I'll have that conversation with kids that were recruiting, and I'll say, did you start on the varsity team when you were a freshman in high school? And most kids did not. And I say, well, it's similar in college, right? Well, you start on the varsity team as a freshman in college, even though there's that desire and that expectation to step into a college program and play right away. It's a progression, right? There's a learning curve that has to happen at the collegiate level the same way it did in high school.
No, it's great point. I actually was talking to Coach Torres down at Point Park. He was on the program a couple of weeks ago. He said that he said a lot of times, from a comparison perspective, college players are ready to play the majors more than the high school players are ready to play at college because the jump is so big. And it's interesting to hear that because you're right. With that being said, what's some of the advice that you can give to players, just, no matter what level that they're looking at from a collegiate perspective, what can they do to better prepare themselves for that jump?
Well, I think first is just educating themselves on what it looks like. What does it look like to play Division III baseball? What does it look like to play Division I or junior college? For many reasons, I think kids have expectations, or perhaps they become labeled, right? Like, I don't know if that kid is a Division I player, or he can only play Division III. I think we need to help prospective high school students figure out what that really looks like. So my advice is not only go to a college game and see them in person, but go to a college practice. I think, when you go to a practice, you're pulling back the curtain and you're seeing a lot more than you would see on game day. First of all, you're going to see all 30 or 40 of those working at practice. And, I think the best college programs, the coaches don't coach very much on game day, right? If you prepare your players right, you let them go perform on game day. But in practice, that's when you really see the coaches at work. I mean, that's our best time is in practice. So if you're interested in a college program and you really want to know what's it going to be like to play for those college coaches, go watch their practice and see how they interact with their players and their teaching methods. But I think a lot of times kids will pick colleges without even really knowing what level of baseball that is. I just saw, and you can turn on the TV and watch Sports Center and, in June and see the highlights of the regionals and super regionals at Division I, but that's not all of college baseball, right? I think it's so critical for kids to know what they're getting into. And I think they would have a deeper appreciation maybe for some lower levels of collegiate baseball, especially with the portal now. I think maybe the value in junior college baseball gets lost. And junior college baseball in certain parts of the country is absolutely phenomenal. It's probably comparable to Division I. And, maybe some kids just turn their nose up at junior college baseball and without knowing that like it's a high level, for a 4-year school after that. And the same with Division III, like the perception is, Division III, that's not as good, or I can play at a higher level. And I'm like, well, maybe you should go watch some Division III games and see the caliber of those players. So, I do think that there is an opportunity out there for every kid that has a desire to play college baseball. It's just, of course, finding that right fit. And I think kids have to understand if I'm looking for that right fit, I need to really know what level of baseball that is. Yep. So observing practices, games is a good first step.
That's a great point. Side note, are practices open then for you and for most coaches with what you understand?
Ours at Seton Hill, ours at Seton Hill are. And I bet you'd be surprised at how many big schools open their practices. I have conversations with friends of mine that are Power 5 coaches, and they've invited us to come watch their practices and just to learn. So I would venture to guess that if you make the request, most college coaches will keep their doors wide open for you to come observe practice.
That's fantastic. Great advice on that. I hear a lot of coaches talk about going to the college showcase, or if you're thinking about these 2 or 3 schools, make sure you go and visit them and can go to their showcase or whatever they might be. But going to their practice, that's great advice, Coach. Thank you for that. So we've already jumped into this, and so before we get into the kind of the recruiting and what you're looking for and some advice, I want to make sure I remind everyone to subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, share and like. It really helps us get the message out. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We're BSBL Blue Book, and also Baseball Blue Book on the other platforms. So I appreciate it. We're with Coach Marizzaldi at Seton Hill, and I know I almost got that right, so I apologize for that, Coach. But hey, we're going to get into the kind of the recruits. You did a nice job of talking kind of the difference and finding your fit. It's easier said than done. As a coach that you've been doing this for a long time, it's your job and your responsibility to kind of figure that out, right? You're looking for the guys that are probably at the higher end, not the lower end. Talk about that and the process that you go through and the kind of players that really fit your program.
Well, there's certain boxes that you really want to try to check with all the kids that you're recruiting, and maybe not exactly in this particular order, but athleticism is something that I think we have to see. Now, that may be a little bit different per position, right? You might want to see a little bit different athleticism from a left-handed pitcher compared to your starting catcher, or a middle infielder compared to a corner outfielder, but I like to try to figure out how much athleticism these kids have when we're recruiting them. Going to showcases and getting measurables is a small part of that, right? 60 times and velocities. And even now, with PBR, being able to obtain other metrics, spin rates and blast motion data, swing metrics, all those things play a part. Yeah. They're not the sole data that we recruit off of, but we want to see athleticism. Finding out what other sports kids play is probably in the first 5 minutes of the first conversation we have with recruits. A lot of theories out there. I'm 100% in favor of multi-sport athletes. I know the trend now is to specialize in one sport, but I love kids that wrestle, play hockey, football. I think you're getting a kid that has a skill set beyond just baseball, which is maybe, as much as we don't want to admit it, it's an individual performance sport. So I like those kids with a little bit more diverse background and athleticism. The second thing is, we want to find kids whose core values align closely with ours, things that are important to us as a baseball program. We want them to be important to our players as well, such as a career beyond baseball. So they have to have academic goals. They don't necessarily have to know exactly what they want to major in, but their education has to be of equal importance to them as their athletic career. Winning has to be extremely important to our players that we're recruiting, and it has to be more important than playing time. So often if a starting position is of utmost importance to a recruit, then that might not be a kid that we recruit. His values and what's important to him, it's not right or wrong. It's just it doesn't align with what's important to us. And of course, character too. Finding out the character of a player means we have to do a little bit of research. Conversations with his summer coach, conversations with his high school coach, conversations with his teammates, maybe with his football coach, maybe with his basketball coach. I want to figure out how does that kid perform and what kind of teammate is he when things are going bad. That's what interests me. We all know how kids perform when things are going well, but in the sport of baseball, that's, as we try to play and teach a game of failure, I'd like to have an idea of how that kid fails. How good is he when he fails? Those are just some things that are important to us, athleticism and, his academic importance, his character, things like that. Of course, his skill sets are going to play too. I want to see how well that kid competes in a game. I would say 99% of the time we won't offer or commit a player unless we've seen him in two different settings, or I shouldn't say two different settings, but at least two times. And one of those has to be in a live game situation. So video is pretty valuable for us. It's kind of the starting point, right? Like video is what'll get us intrigued. If we see some athletic ability on a video, then we'll be probably intrigued to go watch that kid compete in a game and see if some of the movement patterns and athletic ability we see on video, if that's able to translate to in-game, which some kids it does, some kids it doesn't. We can see a kid in a showcase setting multiple times, but we most likely will not commit or sign that kid or offer him until we see him in a game situation as well, to see some of those intangibles as well as whether his skills play.
Coach, just elaborate on that right there, and talk about the value of the game in game, and it really ties into the multi-sport. I've heard coaches talk about, if you're a one sport person, you do a lot of training, but there's not a lot of game. And if you're a multi-sport kind of guy, you're in a lot of game situations. So learning to win, learning to compete in those. So talk about that, and then kind of how that bridges to the showcase stats versus the in-game of what you're really looking for.
Yeah, well, we've made a lot of mistakes on the recruiting trail where we fall in love with a kid who's flashing a 90 in a showcase, and he's got the big score, the guy that jumps in BP in a showcase and he's launching 4 or 5 balls over the fence, and you see, he's got raw power, but can he pitch?
Right.
Can he manage the bats? Does he have good pitch selection? All those things that you can get fooled a little bit in a showcase setting. And I've also seen kids that are average baseball players but play multi-sports do some things on the baseball field that I fall in love with, such as picking up their teammates. They're constant communicators on the field all the time. They're energy givers, right? They might not be the best skill set player, but you come to find out that kid plays quarterback on his football team, or he's the point guard. He might not lead his team in scoring, but he leads in assists,
Right.
or he leads in rebounding. It's like, man, that kid knows how to do some dirty work without being in the spotlight. So I love kids that wrestle because it's one-on-one,
Yep.
right? Like, you can't run out of that ring. It's you versus him. And again, as much as we want to say baseball is a team sport, it's you in the batter's box versus that guy on the mound.
Yep.
And that's the most pressure-packed part of the game of baseball, is the one-on-one combat that happens. So if you can find some kids that do wrestle, or even to an extent play golf, a little bit more individual sport that takes some real good mental fortitude and ability to flush negative things. Like, I just think you can tell a lot about a kid based on how they perform in other environments.
That's great. That's great, Coach. I appreciate that. Advice time. We're talking, a lot of people that listen to the program. Obviously, a lot of coaches listen to it. That doesn't, I never want anybody to be afraid of that, because what are they going to say? But we do get some good banter with that. But really, more importantly, is the parents and the players, right? You talk about you talk about educating and getting people the information to make good decisions. These kids, there's so much going on, right? You talk about all of the analytics that are going on, and you can kind of get caught up on it. Just like you said, coaches can get enamored by some of these showcase stats. Parents as well get enamored by a lot of the glitz that's out there, what we brought to the game. Talk to those parents, the parents that are going through this. They're starting to introduce the travel concept, the trainers, the analytics, all of these things. Talk a little bit about that and why it's important and what isn't important, and from a college coach's perspective.
Would I be speaking more towards, youth coaches, or more, am I speaking advice more towards kids that are in high school moving on to college?
It's typically parents of players that are in kind of going into that high school level. But we also do have some youth coaches as well that do listen to it. But really, the message is to the player, and why is it important to focus on certain things?
Well, I would like to say that I think, at least on the lower levels, maybe your 10 to 14-year-old, travel ball teams. Is that a Rolling Rock Cup, by the way?
Yes, it is.
The brewery's right down the road.
I know. That's what I told you. That's my favorite part of the country. I mean, I did so much traveling up and down 22 and 30, and going to Latrobe, going to State College. I covered a lot of businesses around there. Actually, right there at Greensburg Hospital was one of my clients back in the day.
Nice. Sorry to sidetrack
That's okay.
there. No, but I think, the best thing you can do for a young kid who's getting into travel ball is get him into the right travel ball organization. How do you know if it's the right travel ball organization? Well, I think, when we're talking more of like 10 to 14-year-olds, they don't care about trophies, first of all, and they have to be, that organization has to be fully committed and obsessed to teaching the game, not necessarily winning, although I think those organizations do have to teach kids, like, there's winners and there's losers. Not everybody plays the same. Not everybody gets a trophy. Like, the scoreboard does matter. However, what's most important is we're teaching them the game. And I think what might get lost in those lower level travel balls is that there's no opportunities to teach the game. It's a tournament that starts on Thursday and ends on Sunday, and all we do is play games. And then we'll see you next Thursday, where we just play games. Now, of course, I think good coaches teach through gameplay, right? But there has to be a balance there. There has to be a balance of instruction, skill development, and then gameplay. But I feel like at the lower levels, everything is tilted towards just tournament play, and we miss opportunities to teach the game. The days of sandlot baseball, where Monday through Friday from 9 till noon, you ride your bike to the baseball field. Let's be honest. I think those have come and gone, right?
Right.
And that's where I learned the game. That's where most of us learned how to play the game is on the sandlot. And now there's much more of a focus towards tournament play. And the thing about tournament play in most cases is if you go 4-0 this weekend, it doesn't matter. If you go 0-4 this weekend, it doesn't matter because there's a new tournament next week. And I don't know what the solution is to that. That's where we are now with travel AAU baseball. But again, I grew up as a Legion coach, and I mean, you high school was important, but you look forward to that Legion season where your goal was to win games, make the playoffs, get to the state tournament.
Yep.
So winning, it mattered. And in between those games, you practiced, a couple days a week. That's what your summers were. So it's a different landscape now. And I think at the end of the day, the best thing we can do is try to teach the game first, with, a little bit of accountability of, you got to win and you got to lose. Now moving a little bit further up the chain and maybe how do we speak and educate high school parents? Similarly, you want to have those kids playing for AAU programs that will teach them the game and prepare them for college, but also be honest with them. And I understand, there's thousands of dollars now to spent on playing AAU baseball. So maybe some of those organizations feel like, well, if parents are paying me $3,000, I'm not going to tell them their kid stinks, but sometimes we got to tell them their kid stinks, right? So they don't have false expectations when it comes to going to college. But as you move through that high school realm, and we're starting to look a little bit further ahead to, I do have aspirations of playing college baseball somewhere. Okay, well, what's that checklist look like? I like to tell parents that the recruiting process works better if we reverse it, meaning instead of players and parents waiting for all these college coaches, okay, who's going to recruit me, right? Who's going to call me? Who's going to offer me? I think there has to be some homework done on the parents. The process should start with that player and parents sitting down together and basically asking yourselves, what's important to me? And the things that need to be looked at are size of the school, right? Do I want a 20,000 or 2,000? How far from home do I want to go? 2 hours or 10 hours? What do I want to study? Am I better suited for a liberal arts college or, a bigger university? I do think you can start to ask yourself, what level of baseball do I want to play at? But again, going back to what I said before, have a good idea what that looks like. You can't just say, I want to play Division I without knowing, what that looks like and does your skill set match up with that. Financially, what is affordable for you and your family? Of course, we all want to go to Wake Forest. Why would you not want to go to Wake Forest, especially right now? But, it's $70,000 and not everybody gets a full ride, right? So I think it's much easier for parents and players to navigate the recruiting process if they've narrowed their focus and say, okay, these 10 all of the boxes that fit for me and my family. Now from those 10 schools, let me reach out and figure out where I might fit the best baseball wise at those schools. What of these 10 schools that check my criteria would present me the best opportunity?
That's great.
I think it's better to go into it that way than to just sit and wait. And I see that right now at this time of the year, the end of August. Mm-hmm. You see the panic button being pressed, right? The Division I recruiting window is, I don't want to say completely closed, but it's very, very narrow at this point. As a division school, we're very deep into the process with shaping up our recruiting class. In Division III schools, we'll get going full force come this fall, right? So for some of the talented baseball players that are sitting there right now and like, I'm not getting any calls, I'm not getting any interest, my question would be, well, who have you reached out to?
Great.
Have you identified some schools that fit your criteria? Have you inquired about their camps? Things like that. So I think that's the best thing that parents and players can do is ask those tough questions as when you're sophomores and juniors. Yep. What's the best fit for you as a family and as a player?
That's great advice. One of the things that I always, it's not a laughing matter, but I have to chuckle with it, is when kids pick their schools, they have no idea what schools are out there. I mean, Seton Hill, for a kid that goes to North Allegheny, he may not even know what Seton Hill is, and that it's in Greensburg and it's an hour away, because all they're doing is focused on the D1 or they're, so I think educating and then giving people the tools to go out and do that search, because there's good fits everywhere. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about the podcast is I talk to a lot. I've talked to D1 coaches. I've talked to Georgetown. I've talked to a couple other D1s. But the D2, D3, and the NAIAs is so unique. And I think the issue is the exposure. Kids just don't know about them. If they're not a school that's within 30 to 45 minutes of them, they have absolutely no idea who they are. They don't realize there's 800 JUCO schools. There's 450 Division III schools. I mean, people have no idea that D1 is the smallest of all of them. There's only 300 plus. So I think that's really, really good advice that you bring there. Now, the one question I want to ask you on some of the things that you said, we talked about sandlot ball and that's come and gone, and people are doing the AAU ball, they're doing travel ball, they're doing all this other stuff. As a coach for 21 years, you've seen that transition. What are you seeing lacking, and what are you seeing better based on that transition?
Well, I think what's better now than 20 years ago is the athleticism of the players. And I think it's because there's a much bigger emphasis on weight training. You have specialized strength and conditioning coaches at the high school level now. There's just more knowledge, research, technology out there to develop players at a little bit higher level, right? I mean, Rapsodo and bat sensors, like 20 years ago, I don't think our players on our team had cell phones 20 years ago, right? So there's just so much more information at our fingertips, and information is power, right? And a lot of young athletes now have been able to translate that information into being better players at a younger age. So kids throw harder now than they ever have. I remember 20 years ago, if I went to a high school game and saw a kid throwing 85, I was like, oh my gosh, we got to recruit that kid. And now I think everybody throws 85. So, just the players now, and I think that's every sport, football, basketball, track and field, you're just seeing better athletes. So I think that is better. The talent level is certainly much higher. But I think there is I don't know how to say this without sounding old school, but there's a lack of figure it outness among kids nowadays. And I think it's because there is so much information. So what's benefited us has also hurt us, right? Kids don't have to figure a whole lot out on their own anymore. They just Google it or look it up on YouTube. But I feel like we have to teach the game of baseball at a little bit more detailed level than we used to, mainly because it's just tournament ball every weekend. And but we're teaching it now to a little bit higher level skilled players than we were 20 years ago. And another thing that's changed quite a bit, I think, is the mental health of our young athletes and our young student athletes. It's something that it's changed me as a coach. The old suck it up, just get tougher. That's not it anymore. That used to work 20 years ago. You could coach a little bit differently, but kids have different needs now. And as a college coach, you have to be much more aware of and also in tune to their mental health needs. I have my theories on why that is, but that's probably a different podcast. But Yeah, that the mental health of our student athletes now is certainly at the forefront. A lot more prevalent than it was 20
Yep.
years ago.
Yep. Coach, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. It's been an honor having you on, getting to know you a little bit. We're excited to get this out there, and your advice is fantastic. I appreciate it. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric. It's certainly been an honor, and I appreciated the opportunity to speak with
Hey,
you.
take care.